The clinking of glasses ceased, and words cut through the air like glass. "You are not welcome here." Hundreds of eyes stared at me, and my son's bride beamed with triumph. I smiled thinly, maliciously. "I'll leave. But first, meet my guest." When he stepped out of the shadows, her face paled more than her wedding dress. "My name is Eleanor Carter, but everyone calls me Ellie. I am 67 years old, and I have devoted my life to my son Daniel since my husband's death. For his happiness, I mortgaged my house, spent my last savings, and arranged the wedding he had always dreamed of. But amid the petals and pearls I already knew, a stranger's smile would destroy our home to its foundations. If you have ever doubted a person to whom you entrusted the heart of a loved one, this story is for you. Write in the comments if you have ever encountered deception. Subscribe because, believe me, you will be interested to find out how it all ended. From the very first day, something didn't add up. Olivia knew how to smile as if every sentence she uttered was a gift from heaven. Daniel looked at her with adoration, and I looked at her slender fingers, which gripped the glass too tightly, leaving white marks on the glass. "You're so perfect," he whispered once, and those words made my mouth go dry. We were sitting on the porch, surrounded by the scent of jasmine, and it seemed as if South Carolina itself was blessing their union. But every word she said sounded like a line from a play, rehearsed to perfection. "I lived in Nebraska when I was a child," she said, and an hour later she was already mentioning Arizona. I gripped the armrests of my chair, feeling my nails dig into the fabric. When I handed her the family album, she flipped through the pages too quickly, barely looking. "What beautiful roots you have," she said hastily, and then she laughed, and the laugh was as empty as cheap champagne. I looked down at her bracelet. The thin chain glinted in the lamplight like a warning. That evening, for the first time, I thought, maybe the perfect picture was painted by someone else's hand. Words that were not meant for my ears cut through the silence like a blade. I entered Daniel's apartment with a box of wedding candles, and Olivia's muffled voice came from the bedroom. The door was closed, and I froze in the hallway, feeling my knees buckle treacherously. "Don't call here." Her voice was hoarse, devoid of the tenderness with which she had enveloped my son. I clutched the box so tightly that the cardboard crunched between my fingers. "Yes, everything is going according to plan. After the signing, I'll have access to the accounts. No, 30% is final." I stood without breathing, as if any movement could give away my presence. A man's name rang out in the room. Eitan. Not Daniel. Someone else entirely. "The old woman has already invested more than 40,000. We'll get more for the house. This guy is worth 200, maybe more." Olivia's voice was dry, businesslike. My heart was beating so loudly that I was afraid she would hear it. I backed away toward the door, praying that the floorboards wouldn't creak. My throat was dry, my temples throbbing. "He doesn't suspect a thing, he's head over heels in love." Her words burned me more than fire. I ran out into the street, holding the box like a shield. The air was sticky and heavy. Cars rushed by, unaware that someone's life was falling apart in one apartment. And then I realized, my son was not a fiancé to her, but prey, and the hunt had already begun. I almost ran out of the building, clutching the box to my chest like a life buoy. My chest felt tight, as if someone had pulled a belt tight around it. Cars sped by, their headlights cutting into my eyes. I walked quickly, but my legs buckled, and every step made my knees tremble. Inside the car, the air was stuffy and hot. I slammed the door and turned on the hazard lights, as if that could protect me from the betrayal I had heard a minute ago. My fingers wouldn't obey me. The keys fell onto the mat. I picked them up, but my palms were wet and slippery. In the mirror I saw my own face, contorted, unfamiliar, my eyes red, my lips colorless. God, how could I? The words burst out, and my voice echoed strangely in the confined space. A box of candles swayed on the seat next to me, and this peaceful cargo suddenly seemed like a mockery. I buried my forehead in the steering wheel, and the metal was cold, but it did not cool the feverish heat in my temples. I closed my eyes and counted my breaths, but the air rushed into my lungs convulsively, as if I were drowning. Cars were honking behind me, but I couldn't move. I grabbed the steering wheel with both hands, and it slipped away, as if pushing me away. The steering wheel had a life of its own, and I realized that if I didn't pull myself together, I would lose control, just as I was losing my son. Tears flowed freely, but at some point, I grew tired of being weak. I sat on the side of the road, looked at the wet asphalt, and remembered how many years ago I held my husband's hand in the hospital. His skin was dry, thin as tissue paper, and the doctors whispered about his chances. Back then, I didn't allow myself to break down. I remembered how I brought him books at night and read aloud until I fell asleep in my chair. Back then, every breath he took was my victory. Now, sitting in the car with trembling fingers, I suddenly felt the same heaviness of choice, to give up or to fight. "No," I said aloud, and my own voice sounded firmer than I had expected. "You're not taking my son." The words filled my chest with heat, as if embers had been lit beneath my ribs. I wiped my face with my palm, leaving a wet streak on my cheek, and turned on the headlights, as if signaling to myself, time to move. Fear still sat like a lump in my throat, but determination was breaking through. I pulled away and saw in the mirror that my eyes had changed, become sharper. The pain turned into fuel, and every thought was already looking for a way to strike back. I didn't know yet what my first step would be, but something inside me snapped, replacing softness with steel. And at that moment, I tasted iron in my mouth, as if I were preparing for a fight that would change everything. For the first time in a long time, I entered a cafe not for coffee, but for salvation. The small room smelled of cinnamon and over-roasted beans, and the people around me were leafing through newspapers as if nothing in the world was falling apart. Laura Mitchell was waiting at a table by the window, a sturdy woman in her 50s with a short haircut and the cold gaze of a former police officer. "Mrs. Carter?" Her voice was businesslike, without a hint of friendliness. I nodded, my fingers trembling as I took off my gloves. Inside, I was frantic, but Laura's face showed confidence, as if she dealt with other people's nightmares every day. I told her everything. The phone call, Eitan's name, the money that had already disappeared. She listened attentively, occasionally making notes in a worn notebook. "What you're describing is a classic scheme," she said finally. "The professionals study the victim, become the person the victim is waiting for. Usually the goal is money, sometimes property. Your son fit perfectly into their scenario." The word stung more than a doctor's diagnosis of an illness. I squeezed the cup of cold tea so hard that the porcelain creaked. "How much time do I have?" I breathed. Laura looked me straight in the eye. "Until the wedding." I didn't know whether to thank her or run away, but there was something strangely reassuring about her cold certainty. Her eyes knew no doubt, and in the reflection of the glass, I saw my own face without fear for the first time. Laura's call caught me in the kitchen just as the kettle began to whistle. "Ellie, sit down." Her voice was too calm on the phone. I leaned on the table, feeling the cold wood piercing my palms. "Olivia Hayes doesn't exist," she said. The words hung in the air like the rumble before a thunderstorm. "Her real name is Sarah Collins. Arrests, fraud, fake documents." I gripped the edge of the table tighter, my nails digging into the wood as if that was the only way I could hold on to reality. Laura listed dates, cities, amounts. Each number was like a hammer blow to my head. She always has a partner, most often a man, sometimes posing as a relative. The name Eitan has already come up in cases. I gulped for air, but it stuck in my throat as if it had turned to stone. The kitchen spun around me, and even the kettle, whistling at the top of its voice, seemed distant. "Ellie, are you still with me?" Laura sounded calm, almost dry. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Yes," I squeezed out, grabbing the back of the chair as if it were a handrail in a storm. I turned off the stove, but the ringing in my ears didn't subside. Anger mixed with helplessness rose in my chest. This woman wore my family's pearls, and in her hands they were nothing more than merchandise. The kettle fell silent, but my ears were still ringing with blood, and that noise was louder than any siren. When Laura said the name Ethan Brooks, a spark ignited in me that was unlike fear. It was more like the excitement of a gambler who finally sees a card that can turn everything around. I sat down on the sofa, clutching the phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white. "He was her partner," Laura continued. "Then she led him on too." A strange feeling stirred in my chest, a mixture of rage and curiosity. as if the devil himself had handed me his business card. I imagined this man, left with debts and deceit, and realized that we might have one goal in common. "Do you want to find him?" Laura asked. I swallowed. "Yes. If he knows her better than anyone, he can be my weapon." The words came out firmly, as if I had been rehearsing them my whole life. For a moment, I surprised myself. Yesterday I was trembling at her laughter, and today I was making plans with someone else's enemy. Laura nodded, writing something down in her notebook. "I'll check his contacts, but you must understand, people like that are never harmless." I smiled, my lips trembled, but the smile held. Perfect people aren't harmless either. I knew I was playing with fire, but it was precisely the flame that could burn through the mask Olivia wore. If the devil had chosen an ally, then he could be made to testify against her. I dialed the number so slowly, as if each digit could change the outcome of the war. My heart was pounding in my temples, my fingers were trembling, and I held the phone with both hands so I wouldn't drop it. There was a click on the line, and a man's voice answered dryly, cautiously, "Ethan Brooks." I cleared my throat parched. "Mr. Brooks, my name is Eleanor Carter. I think we have a common enemy." There was a moment of silence on the other end, but I could almost hear him tensing up. His response was short. "Where did you hear that name?" I took a breath, feeling my shoulders tense. "She's marrying my son. She goes by Olivia now." A few heartbeats, then a sharp laugh. "Oh, so Sarah's back in the game. What did she get out of you?" I swallowed. 40,000. And almost my son. He cursed softly, and for the first time, his voice flashed with pain rather than anger. "I warned many people, but no one listened. Are you sure you're not the police?" "No. I'm a mother." The words sounded firmer than I expected, and it grew quiet on the other end. We exchanged a few more words, as if cautiously testing the waters. He didn't trust me, and I didn't trust him. But a fragile bond had already formed between us. A betrayed woman and a betrayed man. And when there was a long pause, I realized that not only his fate was being decided, but mine as well. We spoke as if every word could be a trap. Eitan was silent longer than he spoke, and during those pauses I could hear my own heartbeat. "What do you want from me?" he finally asked. His voice was wary, but there was a hint of fatigue in it. The fatigue of a man who had long been burned by someone else's lies. "I want you to come to the wedding," I said. My mouth went dry at those words, and I swallowed as if I had swallowed a stone. He laughed shortly, joylessly. "You want me to ruin her celebration? That sounds crazy." "It's not a celebration," I replied, feeling my shoulders tense. "It's a scam, and my son is her next victim." A few seconds of silence. Then, "You know, she stole 15,000 from me. Left me on the street with debts and someone else's passport. Do you think I haven't dreamed of seeing her end?" A spark ignited inside me. Not even hope, but a frenzied determination. "Then help me. I can't save him alone." There was a long sigh on the other end of the line. "All right. Give me the address and time. I'll be there. But it's going to be messy." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. We exchanged details and I hung up, holding the phone with both hands as if it were a sacred object. Only then did I realize that I was finally breathing freely, for the first time in a whole day. Instead of trying on dresses, I sat at the table with my phone and a notepad, like a general before battle. The white satin gloves remained in the box as I made one call after another. First to the florists. "The bride's family will pay the bill now." Then to the caterer. "All financial matters will be handled by her side." The words flowed calmly, almost sweetly, and it gave me an icy satisfaction inside. Each conversation was a small prick of a needle in the balloon of her fairy tale. I felt my fingers stop trembling and my movements become precise, almost mechanical. The people on the other end of the line thanked me for my concern, and I knew that in a few days, chaos would begin for them. My evening gown hung in the closet, fresh from the tailor. I ran my hand over it and pulled my fingers away. The fabric was too soft for the role I was about to play. I folded it back into the bag, as if burying the old version of myself. A woman ready for war was coming to take the place of the groom's mother. I drank cold tea and took notes. Arrival time, plan for crossing the garden, meeting point with Eitan. Each item on the list was like the sharpened edge of a blade. I didn't iron the dress. I sharpened the knife, preparing for the day when the mask would come off. The phone grew warm in my palm, as if it knew it would become a weapon. I made a series of calls, first to the venue coordinator, then to the florist, then to the photographer. All further arrangements will now be handled by the bride's family, I said in a sweet tone, as if I were delivering joyful news of reconciliation. On the other end of the line they laughed, thanked me, and asked for contact details. I gave them the number that Laura had confirmed in advance as fake, and at that moment a wave of quiet triumph ran through my skin. I could see the future. Calls that no one would answer, bills hanging in limbo, and growing panic in Olivia's perfectly polished world. Are you sure? The photographer asked again. Usually, such changes are made by official letter. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. My dear, weddings are always exceptions. Isn't that what makes them magical? He muttered something in agreement, and I checked off the item in my notebook. My hands were dry and confident. There was no tremor left in them, only cold precision. With each mark on the list, I felt like an architect of collapse, laying cracks in the foundation of someone else's empire. I finished the last call, closed my notebook, and took a deep breath, as if testing the strength of the air. Each of my calls was a step, and together they formed a staircase leading straight to her downfall. The phone rang just as I was crossing off the last item on the list. Daniel's name lit up on the screen, and my heart sank. Mom, there's a strange situation. The suppliers are calling, saying their bills haven't been paid. Jessica is panicking. Do you know anything about this? I pressed the phone to my ear, trying to keep my voice soft. Oh my God, that's awful. But no, sweetie, I don't know anything about it. My fingers clenched so tightly at that moment that my nails dug into my palm. I could hear his exhaustion, like a tremor in a string, and every pause cut me deeper than a scream. Mom, he lowered his voice. You didn't try to interfere, did you? You promised to leave us alone. I took a breath, my tongue burning with bitterness. Of course, dear. It's your day. I even decided to go to Savannah so I wouldn't get in the way. There was a relieved silence on the other end. I smiled into the phone, but something twisted in my chest like a tight spring. Thanks, Mom. You're the best. Jessica will appreciate your gesture. His words sounded sincere, and that was what killed me. He believed it. I whispered, the main thing is that you're happy. He heard the concern, and I heard the crack in my own heart, and that sound was louder than the whole conversation. The phone rang again, and the name that lit up on the screen made my lips curl. It was her, my future daughter, my future disaster. I picked up the phone with deliberate slowness, as if I had a choice. Mrs. Carter. Her voice was honey thick and cloying. I just wanted to thank you for understanding, for not taking offense. It means so much to me. I held the phone tightly, as if I could crush her voice with my fingers. Oh dear, I replied, almost in a whisper. There's no need to thank me. A bride should be happy. My words sounded affectionate, but a cold shiver ran down my spine. She continued, after the wedding we must meet for lunch, just the two of us. I really want you to be my real family. I almost laughed out loud, not out of joy but out of pure rage. I imagined her rehearsing every intonation in front of the mirror, biting her lip to sound vulnerable. And yet I replied calmly, of course, dear. After the wedding we'll have plenty of time to talk. I hung up, poured myself a glass of red wine and took a sip. It burned my throat, but her future fate seemed sweeter. I woke up in the dark, as if someone had pushed me from within. The house was silent, but my heart was beating so hard that it seemed the walls would hear it. I made coffee, but my hands were shaking so much that half of it spilled past the cup. Instead of my usual dress, I put on a strict black outfit, laconic, like a shadow. At 9 o'clock the phone rang. I'm here, Mrs. Carter. Ethan's voice was dry but confident. I pressed the phone to my cheek, feeling the heat rising from my neck like a fever. Are you sure you're ready? I asked. I've been ready for 2 years, he replied curtly. My list lay on the kitchen table. Times, routes, the code signal. I ran my finger over it as if rereading a spell. Fear still gnawed at me, but determination spread its wings over it. Today, I wasn't asking fate for mercy. I was dispensing it myself. I took the pearl necklace out of the box, the very one I had once given her. I fastened the clasp at my neck and looked in the mirror. My face was tired, but my eyes were shining. I adjusted the pearls like armor before battle, and smiled at my reflection for the first time in a long time. I approached the back entrance, where it smelled of spilled wine and wet wood. The service door slammed open, releasing a waiter with a tray, and I slipped inside as if I had always known this way. My pulse pounded in my temples, each step echoing in my chest like a drumbeat. The corridors buzzed with the voices of staff, everyone rushing around with boxes and plates, oblivious to the woman in black with pearls around her neck. I clutched my bag so tightly that my knuckles turned white, but I walked confidently, as if I had a right to be there. For a second, our eyes met with the young waitress, and I nodded to her as if I were part of the team. She looked away first. Through the glass door, I caught a glimpse of Olivia's white back in her dress. The murmur of the guests grew louder, like the sea beneath the walls. I stopped in the niche between the columns and pressed myself against the cold stone, allowing myself one deep breath. Inside the hall, the ceremony was beginning. Listening to the sounds of the orchestra, I felt the trembling in my fingers give way to a strange calm. Everything was going according to plan, and my place was here, in the shadows. I stayed by the column until the choir sang the first note, and then I realized the performance had begun. When the doors swung open, the air in the hall changed, as if someone had turned off the oxygen. The guests turned around almost simultaneously, and even the orchestra lost its rhythm for half a beat. Ethan stood in the doorway, tall, dressed in a simple gray suit, a stranger in this luxurious spectacle. His gaze was fixed on the altar, and his confidence sent a chill down my spine. I saw Olivia freeze half a step away, her veil trembling as if from a draft that did not exist. Daniel, not understanding anything, made a move toward her, but was left alone against a whole storm. "Excuse me for interrupting," Ethan said, his voice louder than the church bells. The guests exchanged glances, their whispers turning into a swarm ready to break the silence. I squeezed the column with my palm, feeling the cold marble, so as not to betray the shiver that ran through my body. Everything was coming together for what I had been waiting for all these months. Ethan took his first step down the carpeted aisle. Olivia dropped her bouquet, and white roses scattered across the stone floor. The sound of them falling was louder than the music, louder than the whispers, louder than anything that could save her mask. Ethan stepped forward and raised the folder above his head like a verdict. A dozen photographs showed the same woman, only in different dresses, different cities, under different names. In one shot, she was laughing in a Las Vegas casino. In another, she was sitting at a table with a man who was clearly 20 years older than her. "Allow me to introduce the real Olivia Hart," he said, laying the photos out on the nearest bench. "Or Sarah or Jane, depending on which passport is more convenient." A murmur rippled through the room, as if a draft had blown the roof off. Guests craned their necks, trying to see the faces in the photos, their murmurs growing louder. Olivia took a step back, the pearls around her neck rattling. "It's a fake," she cried, but her voice broke into a rasp. I saw Daniel's eyes dart from the photos to his bride, his lips trembling as if he didn't know what to believe. Ethan didn't raise his voice. "I have the files. Arrests. Old partners. Debts. Lies you'd be drowning in, Mr. Thompson, if it weren't for today's stop." Her voice cracked like a mirror, and everyone saw the cracks. The silence in the room became unbearable when Ethan took out his phone. He turned on the recording and her voice, so sweet and familiar, echoed through the arches. "The old woman gave me a necklace. Real pearls. I'll sell it. Enough for a month's vacation." Daniel flinched as if the sound of a slap had hit him in the face. His gaze darted to her neck, where the pearls glowed against the snow-white dress. His shoulders slumped, he exhaled, but his breathing was already ragged, as if he were suffocating. "Daniel, it's a montage," she cried, stepping toward him. But he backed away, and that movement was more frightening than any confession she could have made. I noticed his fingers trembling at his waist, as if he wanted to rip the jewelry off her and throw it on the floor. "Did you laugh at her?" His voice broke. "At my mother?" He wasn't looking at her face, but at the pearls, and there, in every sparkle, he saw lies. He looked at the pearls and realized they were chains. The doors flew open so abruptly that even the organist lost his place in the music. Two men in formal suits entered the hall, flashing their badges. Their footsteps echoed loudly on the marble floor, and there was more condemnation in their gait than in any words. "Olivia Hart, you are under arrest for fraud, forgery, and identity theft." The guests jumped up as if a gust of wind had lifted them from their seats, and a murmur of voices filled the space. Women covered their mouths with their hands, men exchanged glances, as if unable to believe that the wedding scenario had suddenly turned into a crime scene. "This is a mistake. They've been bought off." Her cry rang out, breaking into hysterics. She struggled to break free, but the black metal closed around her wrists. I saw the pearls around her neck tremble with each jerk, turning from jewelry into a noose. Daniel didn't move. Only his eyes, white as the ceiling of a choir loft, watched as she was led away. The white dress was dragged away in black handcuffs. The hall emptied as if a storm had swept away the guests, leaving only the two of us. Daniel stood at the altar, and the white carpet beneath his feet looked like a faded trace of a life unfulfilled. I approached slowly, not knowing how to address him, as the boy I had raised, or as the man who had just lost his mirage. He looked up. "Did you know?" His voice was dull, without reproach, but every letter cut deep. I nodded. My throat felt dry, as if I had swallowed ashes, and the words stuck. "I wanted to protect you, even at the cost of lying." He slumped his shoulders, sat down on the bench, and gestured for me to join him. We sat in silence, only our breathing echoing under the arches. Then he picked up a glass of champagne that someone had left on the table. "To honesty, Mom," he said and raised it. With a trembling hand, I touched his fingers, and the warmth of that touch became more important than any words. We clinked glasses. The sound was quiet, but it signaled reconciliation. I knew there would be long conversations, bitterness, and mistrust ahead. But at that moment, amid the ruins of someone else's wedding, hope was born in us. Sometimes the best weddings are the ones that never happened. Would you be able to destroy an illusion for the sake of someone you love? Write in the comments and subscribe. Believe me, we have stories ahead of us that will make the walls shake.